Are you ready?
Hello, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast, where we promise to bring you home, health, and family all in one place. We're a blog team trying our hand at podcasting, and we like to compare our different purposes and giftings and strengths to the rooms in a house. Together, we make up the whole house. So grab a cup of coffee and join our overly caffeinated team here for the Whole House Podcast. Today we're talking about parenting against the grain here at the Whole House. And it's me, Carly.
And Kathleen.
And Anne-Marie.
And so, first we're going to kind of explain what we mean by parenting against the grain. We kind of look at it as we're choosing to parent counterculturally.
Yes.
The things that we choose to do in our lives and our children's lives, they're not really popular with the culture. And so we sometimes get a lot of backlash from that.
Yes, a lot of stares in public.
A lot of stereotyping. That's what I thought you were going to say. Yes.
Stereotyping, yes.
So we just want to kind of explain our views on parenting and why we do it differently. So the first thing we kind of want to talk about is attachment parenting. And it's really, you may have never heard of it. You may just kind of, I learned that I was just kind of naturally inclined to attachment parenting when I became a parent. I hadn't read about it before when I was pregnant or anything.
Yeah, when I had Cecilia, I was parenting, and then it wasn't until I came across that phrase in a show, and somebody was like, I'm trying this attachment parenting thing, and so I went and looked it up.
And you were like, oh, that's what I've been doing.
Come on, tell us what we're doing.
Okay, so attachment is very simple and very profound at the same time. What happens is when the mother has the infant, the baby's born, then the baby is not able to regulate himself. But when he cries because he's hungry or he's wet or he just wants held.
Yeah, and babies can't regulate emotionally, physically, any of it.
Right, they can't regulate any of that. So what happens is he expresses that need, whatever that need is, through crying. And mother meets the need. And every time mother meets that need, then you're completing a cycle of attachment. And you're actually growing the child's brain, because attachment grows the brain. And that's how a baby's brain grows. And inversely, if the mother is not meeting that child's need and that cycle of attachment is broken over and over again by letting the baby cry it out or saying, you're going to cry yourself to sleep, then that attachment cycle is not only broken, but the brain is not connecting those neurons that it should be connecting. So that's why attachment parenting is so important. It's so simple, but it's so important.
So one of the big things that people usually are shocked by when I talk to them about my parenting and about my girls is, and this goes goes along with the attachment parenting, is the not crying it out thing, is that I don't let my girls cry it out to go to sleep. I don't let them cry it out just when they're sitting there and they're being fussy, because to a baby or to a toddler even to my 4-year-old who still can't fully express her emotions, crying is communicating. So exactly. Crying is saying, I need something from you. I want something from you. And so that's why we sleep with our babies. Sometimes people co-sleep for attachment parenting. I do. I have with some of my girls. We hold them until they go to sleep. We wear them on our bodies in wraps and carriers when they're fussy and when we're out in public because they feel uncomfortable. So attachment parenting really is kind of what it sounds like, is having your child attached to you basically at all times.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in another episode, but we completely understand that this isn't always easy.
Yes.
But it's the way we've chosen to parent, And we're finding, I mean, my kid is only 2, and Amory's is 4. Her oldest is 4. Kathleen obviously has older children, but we really are finding that, like, this makes kids turn out the way we want them to turn out. And it was really good for me. Like I said, I hadn't researched a lot of this stuff before I had my son, and then I was reading books after I had him, and I would read things in it, and I would, like, say, I would read about, the need. We just started co-sleeping naturally at like 5 months, and then I was reading about co-sleeping and how, the baby's getting and I was finding when we were not co-sleeping, I wasn't sleeping well because I wasn't close enough to keep a close enough eye. I was worrying about my baby. So then, like, while I'm reading this, this is a way to keep everyone's minds at ease, and even my husband was so much more at ease when we were co-sleeping with Judah really tiny.
You can't see me shaking my head.
We're all shaking our heads. Yes.
But I would read that, and it was just so good to, like, find validation of the things I felt naturally inclined to do.
And one of the big things is that people keep telling you, like, people tell you when you talk to them and you're like, I'm stressing out about having my baby in the crib, and they're like, oh, that's fine, you'll get over it. But the thing is that you are a mother, and we talked, I think it was at the live Whole House, we talked about how we have a mother gene. It's a real thing. It's the thing that a woman has that is different than something that a woman has that a man does not have, is the mothering gene, and that is your body saying, you do need to be close to your baby. Your baby cannot take care of themselves. So that's like that having that worry is just like your baby crying. It's your body communicating with you and saying, go get the baby and put it in the bed with you.
Yeah.
Okay, and let me talk about the effects of that.
That's what I was gonna
very,
say.
very negative effects. Renee Spitz in the 1950s after World War II did some atrocious experiments regarding infants. In the 50s, people started to believe that babies didn't really need moms.
They didn't need physical touch.
They didn't need physical touch. They didn't need held. And so he did this experiment where he separated infants from their mothers, and these babies had no touch from their mothers. They were just fed. They were not held. Their very, very basic needs were met. And what happened was some of these babies died from not being touched. And some other things that happened is these children developed developmental delays, cognitive delays.
On the Whole House.
Okay, I can't help it. It makes me so sad. And emotional delays that are very difficult to recover from because
and they're things
their brains
that you see.
growing.
They're things you see in children who've been in foster or orphanage care for the first 5 years of their life. They have those developmental delays.
I was going to say, Mom, why don't you talk about when Rafael and Anya came, and they were both.
Well, another very eerie thing about the orphanage, like Carly was mentioning, is a baby orphanage is usually very quiet.
Yeah.
Because what happens is when a baby realizes his needs are not going to be met, he loses his voice. He doesn't use that voice anymore. And because of that, he experiences that emotional and physical and psychological rejection, so that when they do actually leave the orphanage and come home into a family, they have extreme behaviors. They're either extremely clingy or scream all the time or can't regulate themselves, and you have to go back and do those things as if they were an infant again. You have to hold them again. Here I was with Anya holding her, 45 pounds of 4-year-old Anya, and holding her.
Who was a floppy
She was a very floppy child, and so I would have to just hold her and rock her and do those kinds of things that she missed. And the same with Rafael. Rafael had gotten to the point where in the orphanage they put the babies to bed at 7 p.m. and lights out, completely dark, until 7 a.m. when the next staff showed up to get them up. So for the first month or so, that's how he slept. And I thought, oh, great, this is wonderful. But then he realized there were people there to pick him up, and that stopped. And then he just stopped sleeping through the night. And he was 17 months old. He wouldn't sleep through the night anymore.
But when you really think about it, I mean, as a mom, that's a frustrating thing. But for him, it's a wonderful thing that he did that.
He was able to adjust.
Yes.
He needed that. He needed that attachment parenting.
Yes.
So, let's move on to another topic that
doesn't make me cry.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe being a stay-at-home mom does not make you cry. So we are all stay-at-home moms. I worked before I was pregnant, before I had Judah, and then it was kind of just the natural. I didn't plan on it, but it was the natural progression of our lives. I just ended up not having a job after I had my baby. So let's talk about why we're stay-at-home moms. And
Jerry and I have been married for 32 years. We decided when we were engaged that when we had children, after we got married and had children, that I would stay home. And my degree is in education, so I'd already studied some of the psychological effects of being away from your child and that kind of stuff. And so we just decided that. And it was really, really countercultural then, because that was in the very late 80s, early 90s, when every woman was going to work. And every woman was going to college, which I did. And every woman was getting a career and trying to fit it all in.
Yes.
And the hard part to dissect about that is the understanding that women are valuable and important, and staying at home doesn't devalue them.
No.
But that's what our current culture tells us, that, oh, you're staying home because you don't have the ability to do anything else. Instead of, you're staying home because you're doing one of the most important jobs on the planet, which is raising human beings that are stable emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Well, in regards to having one parent stay at home, it's kind of countercultural to live on one income.
Yes.
And so, I mean, we are faced with, it was really hard to buy a house on one income. It's really hard to just find people who can understand, why you can't go on a trip and stay in a hotel with them, and
we had one car for a really long time. And if Jerry went to work, then I was home with the kids. And if I wanted to take the kids somewhere that day, then I would take him to work and bring the car back home.
And I did that for almost 2 years until we happened to acquire a second car.
Amory's still doing that.
Yeah.
That's why everybody's at my house right now. Because I do not have a car. Yes. Seth and I, when we got married, we didn't really talk about whether I'd be a stay-at-home mom or not. And then after I had Cecilia, my oldest, and I started unknowingly attachment parenting. But and you have to remember, I was raised by Kathleen, so all of this was just natural for me. This was what I was raised to do.
She was doing all of this attachment parenting and didn't even know she was doing it.
I didn't know I was doing it. I was working before I had Cecilia, I was doing an after-school program. And so about 3 months after I had Cecilia, I started to try and go back and do the after-school program, even though I didn't want to. And it was only 3 hours, and that's what I kept telling myself. Well, Cecilia would not take a bottle because of my attachment parenting. Yay, me!
I also have a child who never took a bottle.
Yes, she never took a bottle. None of my kids have. So I couldn't do it. And when I quit, and I told Seth, I was like, I never wanted to go back. Like, this is what I wanted to be doing. And he said, well, why didn't you tell me? But so, yeah, it's very countercultural. And I have people that are very close to me that think that I should be working and that criticize me and I think look down on Seth and I because of the fact that I'm not working and I'm not helping to provide financially.
Well, and it took me a long time to get over the feeling that I was not contributing financially to our family. But I mean, in small ways, like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that.
That's hard to swallow in today's culture.
Yeah.
Because people, first of all, family members judge you, and then your church body judges you, and I had women who I was friends with when the kids got school age, and I'm switching topics quickly here, but started
That's okay.
homeschooling.
That's our next topic.
I started homeschooling, and so these women would ask me their kids went to school and they got full-time jobs, and then they were asking me, "Can you meet me for lunch?" And every single time I had to say no, so they just kind of walked away from me, and it is hard because, like Carly was saying, a lot of the things that we have chosen to do, it's not because they're easy, and raising human beings is not easy if you're trying to teach them responsibility, you're trying to teach them how to take care of themselves and the things around them, and you're trying to educate them. All of those things take time, and Dr. Karen Purvis calls that investment parenting. We're investing in the future. So financially, yes, we are doing something because we are raising children who potentially will be solid citizens and won't be in jail, so they won't be using
jealously, I want to do that. I want to do all of that for my child.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know that that's probably not a feeling of everyone, but for me, that's most of the reason why I chose to stay at home, because I want to be there through every step of the way.
I do too.
It makes me really sad when I do have friends who want to stay at home with their kids, but we're sold that lie that we have to have more and bigger and better, and they have to work to, pay their mortgage, pay their car payments. And so it is not popular to choose to have an older car, to choose to live in a lower income neighborhood. It's just
and to do all of the projects at home yourself. Or not to do them until your children grow up and you start doing all of them. I have a friend who is a pediatric dentist, and she told me that she wished she never would have gone to school for that, because she very quickly after she got married had 5 children and then wanted to stay home with them, and she wasn't able to because she was paying off her student loans. And I have another friend who's an attorney who tells young girls who come to her and say, "Should I go to law school?" She says, "No, don't go to law school." She didn't have her child until she was in her 40s, and she still has to work. So we're fed that, you are a liberated woman and you are intelligent, and
I just think our families are fed the lie that we have to live in a $200,000 home. We have to have 2 SUVs that are reliable. Like we just
Well, I think that it's unpopular in both of those. Like the staying at home is unpopular for both those reasons. Is like the liberated woman and like feeling you can do this and do that, and staying at home doesn't mean that you're not a smart woman and you're not a confident woman and that you're not intelligent enough to do a job. It's because it takes a lot to raise children. Like you said, you're raising human beings. Like, and look around you. Everybody that you interact with during the day was once a child and once had to be taught these things, and like taught how to be polite to people and taught how to, and those people that you run into that aren't polite to people, that's because nobody took the time to teach them those things. So I think that it's unpopular for both those ways, for both those reasons. And also I'm going to go back to the attachment parenting and say that like all of my friends that do work, and a lot of my friends have had babies recently, and they've been going back to work recently after their babies, and been posting on Facebook and stuff and saying like, oh, this is so hard, like I miss. Okay, so that's your body and your mind saying go back to your child.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there is a reason, and it's not something that you should be comfortable getting over. I'm sorry, that is what I think. I don't think that it's something that you should be comfortable getting over, like leaving your child with, even if, I understand maybe it's somebody you feel comfortable with, like grandparents or something like that, or a close friend, but it doesn't matter who you leave them with. It's your body saying, no, your child needs you. No, your child needs you.
It's part of your biology.
Yeah.
That's the way that God created us.
Yes.
It is part of our biology to nurture our children. And even though sometimes it goes against our flesh to nurture our children, I'm just going to go back to the time thing. Those things take time.
Yeah.
Investment parenting takes time. And it can't be done in an hour or two in the evening. And unfortunately, this is a really sad fact, and I feel bad because I know a lot of people put their children in daycare because they don't have a choice at that point. But the Laura Schlesinger calls daycare day orphanages because they're finding out the children in daycare have breaks in attachment, and they're having the same issues that a child in an orphanage does. And that's a really sad thing to say about our society, that we feel like we've achieved so much because we have a daycare on every corner and children have a place to go. So I would say, just for you moms that you have no choice, maybe you're the one who has student loans and all those things racked up, and right now you have to work, or you're a single mom, then try to, if you can, find somebody who will keep your child in their home and be in an environment that you would have at home, like a grandmother or somebody who will hold your child and attach with your child, because that's one wonderful thing about attachment. It is transferable, and that's why foster parents can do their jobs and attach to a child, and then that child can sometimes go back to their bio parents and already have that attachment intact.
So I kind of just want my life as a stay-at-home mom to be able to show my friends that it can be done.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to be a positive image of that. So let's move on to...
Well, I want to make a quick note.
Okay.
And I know we'll talk about this later in our podcast when we expand on stay-at-home moms. But we mentioned before we started the podcast that stay-at-home moms doesn't mean that you're at home all the time. Yes.
We're supposed to talk about that.
We go out and we do things.
Yeah.
And we do things with our kids, purposely for our kids. We do things with other moms, with our kids in tow.
Yeah. I can tell you a little bit about like what Judah and I do as a normal
and then
week as staying at home. So we go to the local library to toddler time once a week. So he has friends that he's been in a class with for already a year and a half of his life. That's really fun. I've made friends too. We try to go on like at least one walk a week with somebody else. And we try to visit grandparents once a week. And we have play dates, whether it be with Amory's kids or somebody else's kids. We
just had an apple picking day the other day, and
our friend Lori has a shirt. She's a homeschool mom, and she has a shirt that says, "Oh no, I forgot to socialize the children." And so like we joke about that, but it's so real. Like being a stay-at-home mom does not mean you have to stay at home all day every day.
And it doesn't mean your kids are missing out on experiences either.
So let's move to homeschooling.
Yeah.
I think that, in fact, what Carly's saying, that T-shirt that says, "Oh no, I forgot to socialize the children," I think that when you are a stay-at-home mom and when you're a homeschooling mom and you're intentional about it, your kids get the opportunity to socialize with more age groups in more diverse situations, in diverse culturally situations than they would have had they been in public school all day. Because you get to choose that for your children.
Cecilia can interact easily with kids her age, kids younger than her, and with adults. She is so comfortable having conversations, and she can hold a conversation because she has been around multiple different
Right. And
and I've seen that in like preteens nowadays.
Yeah.
They don't know how to speak to an adult.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in elementary school, my friends made fun of me for talking to the teachers.
Yeah.
But I grew up around, I was not homeschooled. I went to public school my whole life. My mom worked. So like I'm coming from a totally different background, but I was around adults a lot. And I grew up just knowing how to have conversations with people. And so I definitely remember my friends making fun of me for talking to the teachers like they were actual humans.
Well, and the girls had asked me to share a little bit about what it was like having seven children and homeschooling 7 children and going out and about with 7 children. One of the things we did weekly was go to the Rails to Trails and hike, and we'd get about half a mile down the trail because we had to pick every flower and look it up, and the kids just loved it. Another thing we did was go climb on the rocks, but we used to go to a nursing home, and my eldest daughter adopted a grandparent, and she went through this relationship with him for 2 years, and then we ended up going to a hospital when he was dying and went to his funeral. And I'm telling you, that kind of experience of becoming part of someone else's life and loving them and learning about them, that's just, you can't put a price on that.
No, you can't. And I've known like young adults in their late teens or early 20s who've never been to a funeral before.
Yeah.
But you're saying that like your young daughter knew a person through their old age and was learned about the lifespan and why it matters to have relationships with people, and they're learning that so early compared to like people I've known in their 20s who were just faced with mortality.
Right, exactly. And so whenever the kids were younger, I was intentional about taking them to things. We belonged to a homeschool co-op, and the kids were in plays at the local university. I mean, we were constantly socializing, if you want to call it that. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on before we move on is when you do stay at home and when you do homeschool, don't have this picture in your mind that the kids are just sitting in front of a screen all day, because that's not investment parenting.
Or that they're perfectly
or on the other hand, that just because you homeschool or stay at home that your children are going to be perfectly behaved. They're children. They're going to be children. So what was our next topic? I think I'm leading into it.
We still have homeschooling, and we have discipline left on our list for this overview.
Well, I homeschooled for 21 years and graduated all of my children, and I don't know what to say.
That's pretty much, you're batting 100 on homeschooling.
Yeah, okay, I'm batting 100 on homeschooling. Oh, I know what I wanted to say, and this wasn't even about homeschooling. But even when you're
1,000, that's embarrassing. It's 1,000.
Yeah, good job, Carly.
I didn't even know. I don't know anything about sportsing.
Don't listen to that, Gabe.
I just wanted to say that even in the next phase of my life, which is grandparenting, you still have to be intentional with your children. It's not that they move out and they never come back. We just had an apple picking day this week, and planning those events. We have a fall day coming up. Those kinds of things. That's just being an intentional parent and grandparent. You still have to keep doing that, no matter what phase of your life you're in.
Yeah. So, Amory, talk about like your experiences with like early homeschooling, because Cecilia's only almost 4.
Yeah. Well, I will do that. And I want to talk to you about some of the reasons that you homeschool that tie, well, for me, obviously it ties into attachment parenting, especially when I see like little preschoolers and kindergartners get on the bus and I just sit there and I like cry and I'm like, how are you sending your little kid to school? He's so young. And aren't they missing you all day long? Because I don't know what Cecilia would do if she was away from me all day long.
Well, and we will say, not all kids are as clingy.
Yes.
I mean, like, I have a spirited child, and I have read the Spirited Child book, and I know, on the scale, he is spirited, and he requires a lot more attention.
Yes.
He's rather high needs. He requires more attention than some kids. So, we're not saying every kid needs to be, like, full 100% of the time, like...
They're not going to cling to you all the time.
Yes.
Some kids are, some kids aren't.
I'm probably going to mention this every episode. I have a stage 5 clinger.
Yes. Yes. But one of the other reasons that Seth and I consciously took, because my husband didn't come from a homeschooling background. He came from a public school background. And he...
and I prayed for him a lot.
Yes. Yes, my mother was very worried about that going into marriage. And he has done like a complete 180. But one of the things that made him change his mind about homeschooling and choosing intentionally to homeschool was that we are called in the Bible to raise up a child in the way that they should go, and to be able to do that means that you are separating your child from cultural thoughts and cultural beliefs, which are what they teach in public schools. So you are separating your child from being raised a certain way and with certain thoughts because they are in this school system for 8 hours a day, and we are choosing to keep them at home. So or sometimes people do choose when they're older. I won't do this with my younger children when they're little, but maybe when they're in high school, like choose to send them to Christian schools. But because you are choosing to raise them in a Christian worldview and raise them in a Christian home, so that they go out and they are prepared to be a Christian in a non-Christian world. And one of
okay, can I tell a little example of that? Okay, so when I was at a homeschooling conference years ago, I can't even remember the speaker's name, but he was talking about missionaries. When you are preparing to become a missionary, you learn the language of the country you're going to, you learn about their culture, and you study for sometimes years before you go to that country. And you're going to go minister the gospel. And I often hear parents say that they want to send their children to school to be salt and light, minister the gospel. But a 4 or 5-year-old has no training. Mm-hmm. They haven't learned the culture. They haven't learned the language that they speak at school, which is a different language than is spoken at home. And you're expecting this little child to minister the gospel when they don't even have an understanding of the gospel themselves. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. And in Deuteronomy, it talks about when you are training your children, it's going to be, you're telling them the great things that God has done, and you're speaking the word to them when they sit, when you stand, when you walk by the way, when you rise up, and when you lie down. And I think that pretty much covers your whole day.
Yeah.
All of that time. Like, I'm going to keep saying that word, time. You can't do that in half an hour in the morning and 2 hours at night. It requires time.
Yeah. But going back to my experience with homeschooling, my youngest I did preschool with her last year, and this year, even though she's just about to turn 4, I'm starting kindergarten with her. We do everything that your child would do in a preschool. We do crafts. We do our calendar every day. We sing songs about the days of the week and things like that. And honestly, even though I was homeschooled, because I was homeschooled from before preschool all the way up till I never went to any public school, I was intimidated coming into homeschooling. So, and people always ask me, they're like, oh, you're homeschooling and you were homeschooled, oh, you must feel so prepared, no, I didn't feel ready. And I will tell people that again and again, because moms always tell me, they're like, oh, I couldn't do that. And that's
but let's say, so it doesn't have to be so difficult. Like, what you went based on just a schedule from someone's blog last year, right?
Yeah, last year I just followed this lady's blog, and she just had different activities for each letter. Yeah.
And things I've looked at.
Things like that. And I was going to say, I was very intimidated, and I'm still intimidated.
You did great.
Going each year into homeschooling. And I think that all moms feel that way, no matter how many kids they homeschool, because each year your child is going into a new grade. Each year your child is learning, Elsie, you're learning new things and crossing new territory and everything like that. So never feel like it's something that you can't do, because remember that your kid, if you start from when your kid is little, then you guys are starting together. They have no expectation of anything. You are and if you are starting with a kid that has been in school, remember again that you guys are starting this together. They have no expectation of what homeschooling will look like, and that's so.
Well, one of the things that because I homeschooled for so long, and yes, I was intimidated by it every year. But one of the things that I tell moms is, when they're panicking, because my child doesn't know fractions and he's going into 5th grade, well, first of all, you have time. And second of all, each child is different. And that's one of the wonderful things about homeschooling is you don't have to teach a child a certain thing at a certain time. Mm-hmm. You get to teach them when they're ready. Well, some of my kids read at 4, and some of them read at 8. And that's okay, because guess what? All of my kids can read. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Carly?
I can't remember.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. You can individualize your schooling.
Oh, yeah.
You learn how your children learn.
Well, and that's something I don't like to brag on my child, because he is young and I don't know what he's going to turn out like, but he is very smart right now.
Yes.
And so, smart. He's like not as smart as his dad apparently was when he was a kid.
Okay.
But
I don't know. I beg to differ.
I think he's just more shy than he was when he was little.
But so I'm probably teaching things that he would learn in a preschool.
Yes.
But I feel like he will learn more. He won't be.
Yes. Yeah.
There won't be any restrictions on what he can learn at home, as opposed to,
he's reaching.
Say a preschool's curriculum for the whole year is just to get through the ABCs, and at home we could do ABCs. We could do anything we want.
And that's one of the problems with private public school, any kind of schooling that is not taught by the parents, is that the intelligent children get bored.
Yeah.
And the children who have learning disabilities feel frustrated all the time because they're behind all the time, and they get the message that you're bad. That's the kind of message you get.
And they're not getting one-on-one.
Exactly.
I know great teachers. Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are teachers. But there's still, it doesn't matter how great of a teacher you are, you can't give one-on-one attention to 40 kids every day. Yes. It's not possible.
Yes.
So.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and our family's full of teachers, and yes, there are all kinds of wonderful teachers out there that are overstressed and overworked and can't meet the needs of every child in the classroom. Yeah. And when you choose to homeschool, then you can do a lot more one-on-one, and you can work on their strengths, and you can also slowly work on their weaknesses to bring them up to par. And I was
going to say, I was just going to tell them myself. So
all right, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I was in high school, I sucked at math. Like, guys, I big time sucked at math. I did algebra, like the beginning algebra 1, all 4 years of high school. Okay? I never made it past algebra. I never made it to algebra 2. Never really made it through geometry. I sucked at algebra.
Well, and here's the thing. Some parents, I had a little bit of experience by the time that Amory did algebra every year, but she's only the second one. But I've had a lot of parents come to me panicking that their 15 or 16-year-old can't conquer geometry. And the question I ask them is, what does that child want to do with their life?
I did not go into math.
And
I didn't.
10
Not
years
even
from now,
close to that.
right, 10 years from now, is that going to matter?
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but nobody's asked me to do a geometry proof lately. I mean, I could do one because I love geometry, but that's the thing. You can discern for your child what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are,
and what they actually need to learn.
And chances are, if they're poor at math, they're going to marry someone who's really good at math, and then they're just there for them. That's my math all the time. When I'm cooking and I need to double something, I just ask him.
Yeah.
Okay? So, but even though I stunk at math, and my mom was had to consistently do algebra over with me, I flourished in other areas. By the time I was in like 6th grade, I was on a 12th grade reading level, and my mom was able to really help me grow in those areas. And those are the areas that I flourish in now, and that helped me when I did go to college. And so because of that, I felt like I flourished way more, and I was a poor test taker in general. So I feel like if I would have gone to a public school, I would have just really felt defeated my whole entire high school life.
Well, and coming from a public school background, a lot of things just came naturally to me. And I remember switching schools when my family moved just across town. When I was in 5th grade, I switched to a different school district, and I went from like being an average student in my old school to being like top of the class in my new school. And so suddenly things were very, very easy, and that continued into high school. And so like I graduated at the top of my class in high school, but then I went to college and I didn't know how to work on my own, work at my own pace. I didn't know how to like actually do homework because I didn't have to do that in high school. I got everything done in class.
Right.
And so like when I went to college, some of my best friends were homeschooled, and they were like, they knew how to discipline themselves and get their homework done, and it was not things I was taught in school.
Right, and that's another thing, a common thing for homeschool kids do well in college, because they've already learned independent learning and how to keep a schedule. And
that was something I never ever learned.
I always felt comfortable going, like when your professor was like, my office hours are from here to here. I always went, because I never felt weird going and talking to this person because the person who had been in charge of my education was my mom.
See, I never went because I didn't want to ask for help.
Yeah, and I just asked for help because I had been asking my mom for help my whole life, and then this person is teaching me now. Okay, it's their job to help me now. So
right, which we'll go into more detail when we do some podcasts.
Clearly, homeschooling is going to be talked about again.
Yes.
So my list was a little bit out of order, but I have discipline next. And the first thing I want to say is that discipline and parenting styles do need to be catered to your child. So I mentioned Judah's spirited. Like, my spirited child needs to be disciplined and parented differently than another kid. So, like, my child needs a lot of, we talk through things a lot. Like, if he's overwhelmed, we have to talk about it. I have to explain clearly what we're doing for the day, where we're going. And he's still going to ask 1,000 times where we're going. And I just have to tell him that's how he's learning. But so I'm not very deep into the discipline yet.
Well, and we had talked about this before we started recording, is that the difference is we discipline and train our children as opposed to punishment. Mm-hmm. Because punishment just produces fear, and we don't want that produced in our children. And I had to do a lot more go back and attach parenting because 4 of my children were adopted from Poland, and so I had to go back and do a lot of that, which made me read a lot more about parenting. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've done, I did with my bio kids before I adopted, was do more training and not punishment. And training is just learning something outside of the moment. Practicing going to the library before you go to the library so the kids know what to do. Practicing eating in a restaurant before you go to the restaurant, because we can't assume that our children are adults or will act like adults. And even with that training beforehand, there are still going to be episodes of meltdowns when they're hungry or tired. But we still have that training in the bank.
Yeah, so when we say discipline, we don't just mean yelling. And here's the thing, it's not that we don't have these moments where we get really frustrated and we yell, because all moms have those moments. Yeah. But we choose to discipline in a different way than just yelling. We choose to, like Carly said, either talk to our child and teach them.
It's kind of more coaching through.
It's coaching. I was just telling Carly and Kathleen that Cecilia, she's about to turn 4, and when she does things that when she's doing something wrong and she knows that it's wrong, I remind her, I'm like, you are choosing to make this decision that's going to have a consequence. Mm-hmm. I tell her that. I say, you are choosing to be disobedient, and that disobedience is going to lead to this. That disobedience is going to lead to you not having a sweetie after dinner, which is what we call dessert, or you having to eat this dinner tomorrow morning for breakfast because you are supposed to be sitting down and eating it now. You are the one making a choice. And so that's the thing, is that you can't just we think that you can't just yell at your kids and they are going to flourish in life, because that's not true.
And different kids respond in different ways to different forms of discipline. Yes. So, I know that I personally do not want to spank my child. That's not going to be my form of discipline. Yeah. But I also know his personality would not take that well. Yeah. He would feel completely betrayed by that. Yeah. He would be scared of me. Yeah. And so that's one thing I have learned so far, that that different kids. So say a timeout works really well for one kid, it may not work very well for another kid.
Timeout would not work for Cecilia because she physically cannot stop talking. It is impossible for her. And so what would happen was she would just end up staying in this chair all day long, because I would have to say, okay, if you keep talking, then you're going to have another 2 minutes. If you keep talking, you're going to have another. And she can't do it. She cannot stop talking, guys. She talked herself to sleep last night. Well, so what works for me is, get spanking, because it takes her out of her element. It pauses her day, and it reminds her, you made this choice. And that's what I tell her. You made this choice. Yeah. You chose this. You chose to be disobedient. You chose this. And I give her, and then after I give her a spanking, I give her a kiss and a squeeze, which is a hug, and then I don't talk about it anymore, because the punishment, or not the punishment, but the discipline is over. It's done with, and you are moving on and going to something else.
Right, you don't remember that,
and that's different from culture, because we choose to overlook, we don't dwell on the past. We don't dwell on.
You let it go.
Love does not.
Yeah, toddlers or kids, not just toddlers, but kids, they bounce back really quickly from somebody being mean to them, or them getting snapped at, or something like that. Yeah. And they're made to do that. Like they're made to just bounce back and be okay again. And some kids, they dwell on it a little bit longer, their personality. But you are just basically, you're not teaching them anything. You're just bringing them down. If you keep talking about like, you did this and you did this and you did this and you did this.
Well, and I was
teaching them to loathe themselves, which you don't want to do.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend a while back about how she was telling me about something she listened to that said the words you use literally change your child's brain.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you're speaking positive things, that's growing your child's brain in a good way. If you're speaking negatively about them, even about them, say they're in the back seat of the car and you're talking on the phone and you're saying, he's being a monster today. Yeah. Like, they're hearing that. It is affecting them even when you think it isn't. So she was, and it changed the way I was thinking too. She was consciously making decisions to speak positively about her daughter. Yeah. So her daughter thought positively about herself.
Exactly. And that's something interesting to think about. I have a little bit different perspective because of raising children that came from traumatic beginnings. Is your children have their own belief system. And my children came to me with some beliefs that were really sad, like I'm not valuable, I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, I don't matter. And your children being raised by you in your home biologically, they are going to form their beliefs based on what you say about them and the way that you treat them. And that's one of the reasons we don't remind our children of something that happened half an hour ago. That's why we remind them that they are just like us. They mess up. You repent or apologize, or you have a consequence and you move on, because that's what we want as an adult. And we want our children to believe that they are loved and believe that they are valuable, because they are, but they're not going to know that if they don't hear it from us, because who else are they going to hear it from?
And so how another way to reinforce that they are loved and they are worth it is worthy and all of those things, is that when you do have those moments of bad mom moments, because we all, like I said, we all have them. When you do snap and you yell at your kids and you get really frustrated, is that I have found myself recently, just because I've had a new baby and things are all like changing, my schedule's changing, learning how to deal with 3 babies, is I've been snapping at Cecilia a lot. And so I've been getting down and looking at her in the face and saying, I am sorry, I should not have done this. And so you can't treat your children poorly in that moment and then not address it later.
Right, that's such a powerful thing to do. Later.
Well, and you can't. I was reading about how even when you're just saying, like, no, don't put that on the floor, don't get into that cabinet, if you want them to learn manners, like asking please and thank you, you need to say, no, don't get in that cabinet, please. You need to make it, don't make it such a negative way when you're disciplining. It's like, you still need to make it kind. If you're teaching them to be kind, you need to be kind.
And I would even take that a step further and say, try to turn that no into a yes. Because our children hear no so frequently that they need to hear yes more frequently.
I was listening to Doug Wilson and his wife, Nancy Wilson. They were doing a question and answer video with parents, and one of the questions, I don't even remember what the question was, but I remember very clearly Nancy's answer was, I found myself saying no to my children all the time, so I started saying, give me a few minutes to think about it and then come back and ask me. Because she said most of the time, then I was like, yes, you may do that. Or yes, can you give me a few minutes, instead of me just saying, no, that's not going to happen. No, you can't do that. No, you can't.
Well, so, and I will say, there are times that no has, you do have to use it. Well,
you have
and
to
like,
use it.
Parenting a 2-year-old requires a lot more over-parenting than I'm comfortable with at this moment. But usually it's like for the sake of keeping him alive.
Yes.
It's like, no, you can't run into the street.
Right.
And I do have to yell about that.
Yes. There are moments like that where you, but then there are moments when Cecilia comes and like everybody came over to my house today, so she was so excited and she kept asking to play this board game. And everybody was, wanted to socialize with everybody else, and so they kept telling her no. And she came to ask me if I would play it, and I knew she was going to ask me because she'd already asked everybody else. And I was like preparing my no and trying to be sweet with my no, but then I thought, why? Because everybody else is doing what they want to do, like they're socializing and seeing people, and she's just excited and wants to play this game. So you have to stop and think about it. And I stopped and thought about it, and I told her, yes, I would take the time to do this with her. And it's...
Right. You should be, honestly, Deborah Gray says in, I can't remember the title of her book, she says that you should be saying yes 7 times for every no.
Yeah.
And you can turn a lot of no's into yeses, like, yes, you're welcome to play that game after you pick up those toys I ask you to pick.
Yeah.
You
it's
can
still turning it into something positive.
Yes, you're turning it into something positive, and you're giving them the power to get what they want.
Right. Similarly, I was listening to something, and a lady was talking about how every time she found herself, not parenting the way she intended to, yelling, snapping at her child, she would make it up with three like positive connections with her child. So like she would, give them a hug, do something personal with them. For every negative, there were 3 positive things to make up for it.
That's a good ratio. And I'm going to just backtrack for a minute. They were talking about time out when I went to the restroom. Because of my experience and my training with children from hard places, I think that timeout is a really bad discipline technique, because often what that child needs when they are having a meltdown is they need someone to co-regulate with them. Yeah. So I suggest instead that you do time in, which just simply means that if the child needs to sit down or take a break, that they're within 2 to 4 feet away from you. I did this for years, where one of my children would melt down and need somebody to co-regulate with them. Couldn't have a conversation about what happened yet because they were too upset. I would have them sit near me. Maybe I would keep doing the dishes and talking to them. Thank you, Emery.
Cecilia is very emotional. And she, in the morning especially, she's really emotional and kind of weepy, and she ends up falling on the kitchen floor most mornings. And so I have to tell her, you need to go lay in your bed, but then I go and lay with her, because all she's needing is, like I said, she's still little. She can't regulate herself yet. She just is feeling tired and hungry and experiencing a new day all at once. And she's little, so I need to go in there and just talk to her and be with her and lay with her and cuddle with her, and it just helps her have a better morning.
Right, because you're co-regulating and she can't regulate herself, and that's what time in is about. Right. And there's so many other parenting tools that we will get into.
Yeah.
So I will say the biggest thing about discipline, I think for us, is that it's a preemptive strike, basically. You are preparing trying your best to prepare your child to go into the world, so that when they go into the library, you've already been practicing at home, whether it's through everyday life or you do sit down at the table and you have practice time, to listen to you when you say, and to listen to the teacher during story time when they say, sit down, we're going to listen now, sit down, we're going to do this now, or it's time to pick up the books and leave, because what discipline is, in our view, is preparing your child for that, and it's basically the complete opposite of what you see in culture, and that's taking your child out and then telling them they're doing something wrong.
It's reactive parenting, and what we're talking about is proactive parenting. You know, like Carly was saying, Judah needs to know what's going to happen. And he needs to know more than most children. But what child doesn't want to know?
Yeah.
You know, we're going to go to the
happen.
library.
Yeah.
It's going to be big. It's going to be this big brick building. And it's going to have lots of people in it.
Yeah.
Why not prepare your child?
Prepare them for a long day of chores. Like,
Yes.
if you have to go to 3 grocery stores, you better warn your child.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And stop at Starbucks in the middle.
Yeah.
So, like we said at the beginning, these are just some topics that we believe we're consciously choosing to do against popular culture. And so that's why we're calling it Parenting Against the Grain. And we look forward to diving into some more topics regarding parenting against the grain and maybe expanding. Yeah, we're going to go into these in more depth in future episodes. So join us back for some more parenting against the grain next time.